Good morning, everyone. I hope and trust you are well. Welcome to another session on web development. And this particular week, we are going to go through CSS. We are going to go through CSS, see what it is and how you can utilize it in your projects and applications. So before we begin and delve into that, just a few announcements. So right after this class, at around 12:30 East African time, there will be a masterclass on AI agent models. So if you're willing to join that, I think the link is available on your timetables or it has been shared on our social. So if you're willing to join that, you are most welcome. Also to announce, next week we'll be having our very first hackathon. Yeah, so we'll be having our very first hackathon. So it will be on building a portfolio website, your very own portfolio website. So I hope you are looking forward to that, and I hope to see as many submissions from you guys as possible. So please pay mind to that. More information will be shared, of course, in our socials and maybe through other communication channels in the following days to come. Okay, so back to our session. So we are in week 3. We are in week 3 of the web development module, and this particular week we are going to learn about CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets, that is what we are going to go through this particular week. So as usual, we will be going through this practically. So let me just change this to week 3. Yeah, I keep on mentioning it's a good idea to arrange your work. Make sure you arrange your work so that you know where you did what and at what particular time. It's a very good idea to do that. So week 3 is basically centered around CSS. And what does CSS stand for? CSS simply stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets. That is what CSS stands for. And this is basically a style sheet language that is used to control the presentation and layout of your HTML documents. Okay, so the moment you want to modify or define the presentation and layout of your HTML documents, then you introduce cascading style sheets. So it allows you to apply styles such as, and not limited to, colors, fonts, spacing, positioning, and so on and so forth of the different HTML elements. So we are just going to have a brief overview and introduction of CSS. And we are going to cover the basics of CSS, some of the rules, some of the selectors, properties, and values, and the different types of ways in which you can include CSS in your web pages. Okay, so that is what we're going to go through in this particular session. So I hope your Visual Studio Code editors are open, or your preferred code editor. Whichever you prefer to use is still fine. So we will start by looking at CSS rules. CSS rules. So CSS rules, these are simply the how you define the different layouts and styling. How you define the different styling of the different elements of your web pages. And these rules consist of what we refer to as a selector. It consists of what we refer to as a selector and a declaration block. Selector and a declaration blocks. So a selector in CSS simply enables you or gives you a way of selecting a HTML element to style. That is the purpose of a selector. It just gives you a way to pinpoint or to locate a certain or specific element that you want to style on your web pages. Okay, that is the purpose of the selector. Whereas the declaration block simply contains some of the properties that you want to change about an element. Some of the properties that you want to change about an element. And these properties, each of these properties have their own corresponding values. They have their own corresponding values that define the style of the selected element. So we will, let me just give you an example of a CSS rule in its entirety so that you can see. For example, this would be an example of a CSS rule. I will explain each and every section, don't worry. I will explain each and every section. So this would be an example of a CSS rule. So the first bit is what we are referring to as the selector. And for this example, our selector here is P. P corresponds to a paragraph element. It corresponds to a paragraph element. So we are simply saying in CSS that we are selecting all paragraphs. This piece represents all paragraphs within our web page, okay? That is the selector. The declaration block is surrounded by curly braces. The declaration block is surrounded by curly braces. This is what I am referring to as curly braces, this one. That is a curly brace. So the declaration block is surrounded by a curly brace. And within the declaration block, we have your property. Let's do this. You have your property here, followed by a full colon and a value. Okay, so for example, our property here is color. Our property here is color and the value is blue. So property values come in pairs. They usually come in pairs, and every property has its own corresponding values. Every property has its own corresponding values that define the style of the selected element. So for this example, we are simply styling all our paragraphs with the color blue. We're simply styling all the paragraphs with the color blue. And that is how the structure of a CSS rule looks like. And property value pairs are separated by a semicolon. So you define a property and its value. If you will need to define another one, you need to separate them with a semicolon. You need to separate them with a semicolon. So for example, I can say my next property here will be the font size. I want to change the font size and I want it to be 16 pixels or so. Just for example. So what we have done is we are simply saying for our paragraph, let me just get rid of this. We are simply saying for our paragraph, we are changing the color property to blue. And then we are changing the font size to 16 pixels. And basically that is how you define the different CSS rules that you might want to define or specify for your web pages. Okay, good. So now that we have seen how a CSS rule looks like, the structure of a CSS rule, let us now proceed to see some of the different selectors that you might come across when you are defining styling for your web pages. Selectors. Let us see some of the different selectors that you might come across. So at the very top, we have a selector that allows you to target all elements within your page. And we refer to this as the universal selector. The universal selector. The universal selector is denoted by the asterisk sign. Okay. This is number one. We have the universal selector. It is denoted by the asterisk sign. So this one simply targets all HTML elements within your page so that any style that you define will be applied to everything within your page. And how do you do that in a CSS rule? You simply define the asterisk followed by your declaration block, and then your style goes here. The different properties and their corresponding values. So for example, if you want your entire website page to be a certain color, or you want all elements to apply a certain font size or a certain font color, then you would use the universal selector to do so. This applies to all elements, targets all elements, targets all elements. That one targets all elements. Number two on our list of selectors is the element selector. The element selector. And the element selector, just as the name says, the element selectors target a specific element. They target specific elements within your web page. Like the first example that we gave, this is an example of an element selector. It simply targets the paragraph element. Target specific elements. Targets specific elements. So for example, this is targets paragraph elements within your page, meaning that the style that you define here will be applied across all paragraphs. It will be applied across all paragraphs. If you want to target forms, you simply define the form as the selector. If you want to target a H1 heading, you simply define H1 as your selector, and so on and so forth. So whatever element that you define using the element selector, that will be styled according to the properties and values that you define within the declaration block. Number three is the class selector. Number three is the class selector. So this one targets elements with a specific class attribute. Class attribute. This one targets elements with a specific class attribute. So when we were going through elements and their attributes last week and the first week, one of the attributes that you can define for an element is a class attribute. And how does this work? So if you have a group of elements on your web page, and you want to style them in a specific way. And maybe these elements are not related. They are not the same elements. They're not paragraphs. Maybe you have paragraphs and headings, and you want to style them in the same way. Then you would use the class selector. You simply define a class attribute. You simply define a class attribute on the different elements, and then you give them a class name. You give those attributes a class name. The class attribute, you give it a class name. And when you come to your CSS, then you would use the class selector. And how do you define the class selector? This one is defined by a period or a dot, the dot notation. It is defined by a period or the dot notation. For example, let us say I have a paragraph. Let's say I have a paragraph. Just for example, very quickly, I have a paragraph and I also have a H1 heading. Let me also do a H3 heading. So I can simply add a class attribute and call this what name can I call it? I can call this highlight. I can call my class highlight. Same applies to this. I can call my class highlight. So I have here two different elements. They are not related in any way, but I want to style them in the same way. Then I can use the class attribute to do so. And when I come to CSS, I will simply use the dot notation followed by the class name, and then my declaration block. So let me say I want to change the color of both the H3 heading and the paragraph to red. And I would simply do something like that. And that will be a very, very valid form of styling. So in the event that you have different types of elements that are not related in any way, and you want to style those elements in the same way, then you can use the class selector for that. You simply add a class attribute to those elements, give them a class name, and when it comes to the CSS styling, you simply use the dot notation and the class name to define the style for those different sets of elements. Number four. Of course, we'll do a practical example for each of these selectors so that you can see how they are used. Number four, we have the ID selector. We have the ID selector. Who can tell me how did we define an ID? How did we define an ID? On the chat box, very quickly, on the chat box. How did we define an ID? No, that is not how we defined an ID. How did we define an ID? Thank you. Who is this? Was the first one. Susan Wangui, very good. And yeah, Susan Wangui, very good. So if you have said unique identifier, that is very, very correct. So the ID is a unique identifier for any or a specific element within your web page. It is a unique identifier, just like your national ID or your student ID or your passport. It uniquely identifies you in a certain place, whether it is in your country or your school. That one is unique to you, okay? The same thing applies to HTML element. When you use the ID attribute on an element, you are simply saying, I want to uniquely identify this element within this particular web page, okay? So that is what an ID is. So when it comes to CSS, the ID selector targets a specific element, not even just a specific. Let us make it very, very clear. Targets one specific element. Targets one specific element because the ID is unique to one specific element. So when it comes to, let us say you have a table and you want to style it, you would simply add the ID attribute. Call this table 1. For example, let us say I have a table and I give it the ID table 1. And when it comes to CSS, when you are using the ID selector, we use the hash or the pound symbol. We use the hash or the pound symbol. So when it comes to CSS, you simply use the hash symbol followed by the ID name, Our ID name here is table 1. Our ID name here is table 1, and then you follow that with your declaration block. Okay, so that is how you would use the ID selector in CSS. That is how you would use the ID selector in CSS. That is how you'd use the ID selector in CSS. Another selector that I would like us to look at is group selectors. So this one's target a group of elements. They can be related or not related, but this one plays the same role as a class. The syntax is the one that is a bit different. So this one, you are targeting a group of elements. So for example, if I want to style my different types of headings and my paragraphs at the same time, I can simply use the element names. H5, H6, and my paragraphs, all separated by commas. And then I have my declaration block as so. So each of these elements will be styled the same way simply by using this type of syntax. If I do not want to use the class attribute, I can style all these elements in the same way by using the group selector syntax. Maybe we can have a look at one final one before we go into another section. This one is the descendant. Selector. So this one targets elements inside another element. This one targets elements inside another element. They target elements inside another element. So for example, you have a div, and then within the div, you have paragraphs. You can simply target that paragraph using this syntax. Who can define for what is a div? No, we did not go through it, but I'm sure you've come across it through your research and practice. What is a div? Yes, it is a container. Very, very good. Very, very good. A div is a container. Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I think yeah, it's good to see you're doing research, eh? Yes, a div is a container. It is a container. It's used to hold other elements. It is a container. So these are some of the different selectors that you might come across as you interact with CSS. As you interact with CSS, these are some of the common container selectors that you might come across. Now, on to our next section. Before we go and do all this practically, we need to know how do you actually apply this CSS styling to your web page? How do you apply this to your web page? So we are going to create a new file. We're going to create a new file. I want you to call that file index.html. Index.html. Let me just give you a challenge here on the chat box very, very quickly. Just give me the basic structure of a web page. Give me the basic structure of a web page. Include a title, include, I've not finished. Include the title, include a H1 heading, include a paragraph, include an anchor tag, yeah, and a footer with copyright info. So someone very, very quickly, just give me that. So you're doing a basic structure with a title, a H1 heading, a paragraph, an anchor tag, and a footer with copyright information. Who's this? Is this Margaret? Nice, but your footer is missing copyright info. Your footer is missing copyright info. I don't want styling. Can you follow instructions? This is how you fail exams. This is how you fail exams. I want a basic structure of a web page with a H1 heading, a paragraph, an anchor tag, and a footer with copyright information. Let me see. This is Monica. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Monica and Dennis. This is nice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please always follow instructions. Always follow instructions. And let me just give you a piece of advice. For the hackathon, follow the instructions to the letter because that is what will be used to grade your submissions. If you do anything outside of what has been requested, please do not say you made something better because you used other technologies that were not included in the instructions. So please always follow instructions. They will cost you somewhere. Okay. Someone has added lists here. Dennis, I did not ask for lists. But anyway, thank you so much for your attempts. Very, very, very good attempts. Who was the first one to do the correct one? I think it was Monica or Margaret. See the first one to do the correct one. It was Dennis. Yeah, I think it's Dennis. Just get this. Okay, so I will use Dennis's. So yeah, so follow instructions. But Dennis, your paragraph is missing sentence content. Okay. Well, this is fine. This is fine. Thank you, Dennis. And everyone else who did the correct thing. Follow instructions. Follow instructions. Eh? So I'll just change this title to intro to CSS. And change this to cascading style sheets. Style CSS. Okay. Yeah, so basically that is it. Thank you, Dennis. This is good. Okay. So there we have our basic web page. We have a very, very basic web page. We can load this in a browser, see how it comes out. It's in a browser. Yeah, sorry about that. So that is our web page, very basic. Now we want to style this web page. We want to style this web page, and we are going to style it in 3 different ways so that we can see how can you apply CSS on your web page. So step number one on how you can how you can apply CSS on your web page is what we refer to as inline CSS. So I'm just going to do a comment here, inline CSS. And just as the name suggests, this way of applying CSS is in line with the HTML element that you want to apply the styling to. So these styles are applied directly to an element using the style attribute. using the style attribute. So here we go. So you add the style attribute, and then here you only define the property value pairs. You do not need a declaration block. You do not need a selector because we are already within the element that we want to style. So you only use the property value pairs. You only use the property value pairs. So we are going to style the color. I'm going to say, I'll use red and then maybe change the font size to 30 pixels, so that it is very distinct. Very, very distinct. So I'll save that, go back to your, go back to this style. Let me do something bigger. Size is, yeah. So I'll go back to my browser after saving my page, and there I have my font color changed to red, and the size of the H1 heading is now 50 pixels. The size of the H1 heading is 50 pixels. So that is method number one of how you can include your web, your CSS styling on your web page via inline styling, So on the chat box, just by a show, a thumbs up. Let me see. Has been able to change the font color and size of their H1 heading. Size and color of your H1 heading. Very, very good. Congratulations. Congratulations. So I'll just do a recap. Just right now, we'll do a recap. So method number one, we've said method number one is inline styling. Inline styling is where the style is applied directly to an element using the style attribute. You apply the style directly to an element using the style attribute. So what are you going to do? You simply, on the opening tag of an element, you simply add the style attribute. And since we are already within an element, you do not need to have a selector and you do not need to have a declaration block. You will bypass those two and head on straight to the property and the values pairs, the property and the value pairs. So for example, this one, we change the color. Let me use a different color this time. As let me say blue. I want to change to blue. And remember, the property and value pairs are separated by a semicolon. So I can change the font size. Let me change something else. Let me change the font weight. Font weight is boldness. I can say this one is set to 500. So I haven't changed the size this time. I've changed the font weight. So I will save that. And go back to my browser. Save that and go back to my browser. And there I have my heading with the change font weight and font color. Okay. So that is method number one of how you can apply styling to your elements. So this one is a very, very fast, quick, and efficient way of applying your styling. But there is a downside. There is a downside to this method of styling. One, this one will become very hard to maintain. So consider if you have multiple pages or you have multiple elements within your web page. The time and effort it will take you to style each and every individual element will be actually too much. It will become very hard and very tiring. So this one is very, very hard to maintain, this method of styling. And also it is not reusable because you are styling each element on its own. You cannot reuse those properties and values on another element. So this one has an advantage. Yes, it is quick and efficient, very quick and efficient. You just apply the styling once and you're done. Very quick. But then again, it has disadvantages. Hard to maintain, not reusable, and then your code base may not become very, very neat because you're applying styling to every element. How will your code base look like? Okay. So that is method number one. Method number two is what we refer as internal CSS. Internal CSS or internal styling. Internal CSS or internal styling. So with internal CSS, you use the style tag. We are going to use the style tag. And for best coding practices, the style tag is recommended to be placed within the head section. It is recommended to be placed within the head section. So let me just do another comment here. This is method number two, internal CSS or internal styling. So this one you use the style tag. You use the style tag, and it is recommended that you place it within the head section. Just a disclaimer, I have seen the style tag being placed anywhere within the HTML document, and it still worked, but best coding practices dictate that the style tag is placed within the head section. So it is defined within this with a style tag inside the head section of your web page. And this one will follow the structure of a CSS rule. So you begin with a selector, followed by a declaration block, and then your property value pairs, So for example, I want us to style the paragraph. Let us style the paragraph. So we begin with our selector, which is an element selector, followed by a declaration block, followed by our declaration block. For my paragraph, I will simply change the color. Let me do brown. Change the color and the font size. So I can do 20 pixels. Do 20 pixels. Remember last week, we defined a pixel as a basic unit of measurement when it comes to web development. Pixels is considered the basic unit of measurement. Of course, we have other units of measurements. You can do inches, you can do centimeters, you can also do, what is it called? This other one. The name is escaping me. Anyway, yeah. So you can do different units of measurement when it comes to web development, but pixels is the most basic one. So there I have defined my styling for my paragraph element. I'm simply changing the color and the font size. Simply changing the color and the font size of that. So I save my page, and then go back to my browser, go back to my browser, and there is my paragraph. There is my paragraph. The color has changed from black, it is now brown, and I'm sure the size has changed to 20 pixels. The size has changed to 20 pixels. So on the chat box, have you been able to style your paragraph? Have you been able to style your paragraph? Yes, thank you. Dennis, Catherine, Daisy, Peace, Comfort, Evelyn, Grace, Geoffrey, Frida, Ezra, Sarah, Derek. Very, very good. Congratulations. Congratulations. So if not yet, let me just do a recap. Let me just do a recap. Remember, your selector needs to be spot on. We are doing an element selector. If everything has changed to brown, then you have done a wrong selector. Just check on the selector you've used there. Okay, so let me just do a recap. Let me do a recap of internal styling. Internal styling. So with internal styling, we've mentioned, with internal styling, you define your style within the style tag. And the style tag is recommended to be placed within your head section. This is the recommended position within the head section. So you use the style tag, and the style tag surrounds your CSS rules. It surrounds your CSS rules. So for example, here we are styling our paragraph element. And here we have used the element selector. So we will define P. P stands for paragraph. P is a paragraph element. So we are defining the style that will be applied to our paragraph element using the element selector, which is P, followed by our declaration block surrounded by curly braces, followed by a declaration block surrounded by curly braces. And within the curly braces is where you define your styling property and their corresponding values. The styling property and their corresponding value, where the property is the style that you want to modify. Okay, it can be color, it can be size, it can be position. Yeah, yani you are changing the appearance of that element depending on size, location, appearance, and so on and so forth. So for this one, we are changing the color. We are changing the color and the font size. We're changing the color and the font size to 20 pixels. We're changing the color and the font size to 20 pixels for our paragraph. So just on the chat box, even if you're going to Google, it is fine. I want you to change the orientation of this paragraph to the right. I want you to change the orientation of the paragraph to the right very, very quickly on the chat box. Even if you will Google, how do you do that? Using internal CSS. I need the correct rule. Please follow instructions. The correct rule. Thank you, Musi Nzioka. Very, very correct. Please follow instructions. Please follow instructions. Please follow instructions. You follow instructions. I said I need the entire rule. I said I need the entire rule. And sorry. This is what Nzioka has given me. This is text align. Right. Very, very good. Follow instructions, very, very important. Follow instructions. I mentioned, give me the correct rule, the entire rule. What most of you are giving me is the property value pair. So please follow instruction. Yeah, so to change the alignment of your text, that would be the correct property value, and that will be the correct entire rule to change your alignment of text. And as you can see, the text is now aligned to the right. Very, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. So that is method number 2. That is method number 2. Give me a second. Let me just sort something here. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that. And we are back. We are back. We are back. Now, where were we? Yeah. So internal styling. I hope you've been able to do so that we can proceed to our third method of including CSS on our web pages. And this one was wrong. That one was wrong. Okay. Our third way, so let me just do a comment. Number 3 is what we refer to as an external CSS. External CSS. External CSS. But before we proceed to external CSS, for internal CSS, it also has an advantage and a disadvantage. One, as we have noted, this one is also another quick way of including styling on your web pages, but it is suited for small projects. And this type of styling only applies to one particular page. It only applies to one particular page. So if you have a very huge page and you use internal styling, then this will tend to be very, very long. If you define the styling for several or multiple elements, and your web page will end up looking like something very huge. It will not be organized, it will not be readable, very readable, and so on and so forth. So this one can only be beneficial if you have a very, very small project. That is the only moment it will be beneficial. Okay. So method number 3 is what we are referring to as external CSS or external styling. So with this one, we use a separate file. We use a separate file with a .css extension, and that will be our styling file. And this separate file is linked to your HTML document, such that you have separation of concerns. Your web page is defined in one style, and the structure, layout, and styling is defined in a separate file. With this type of styling, it becomes much easier for you to maintain your styling, language, and information, because you are maintaining it from one single file. It becomes very much easier for you to maintain your styling information. And you can simply reuse your file. You can simply reuse your styling information across multiple files. Does not only apply to one file. As long as you link it to different files, then the styling information will be applied across those multiple files. And how do you link that file to your web page? You simply use the link tag. We use the link tag. And this one is a void element. It does not have a closing tag. We use the link tag, and we use these two attributes. One is the relation attribute denoted by REL. The relation attribute denoted by REL. This simply states the relationship of this particular file, and this one by default is style sheet. Style sheets in small. And finally, href. Href points to the location of your external CSS file. This points to the location of the external CSS file. So we're going back to our file explorer. Let me do a folder, call this folder style or styles. And then within styles, I'm going to do my style.css. You can add it within the same directory as your index file. But as I said earlier, And as I always say in each session, it is very, very important for you to always organize your work. Always organize your work in a very, very good way. Put related files together, like images should be in an image directory, styles should be in a styles directory or a CSS directory. So I've created a folder, and within the folder, I have my styling file. It is named style.css. The CSS extension is very important. The CSS extension is very, very important. That is the one that identifies that file as a styling file. So do not miss that. So give it a name, and then we can head back to our index file, and then make sure this location is very, very correct. Make sure it is very, very correct. If you do not have a folder, do not put a folder here. Make sure this location is very, very correct. Otherwise, if the styling file is missing or the location is not correct, your styling information will not be applied to your web page. The styling information will not be applied to your web page. Your styling information will not be applied to your web page. So this location needs to be very, very correct. So once again, method number 3 is external CSS, where you have an external styling document that you then link to your web page, and the styling information is applied to your web page by the browser referencing the styling file that you have linked. And number 2, the styling file needs to be saved with the extension .css. That is how the browser will identify that file as a styling file, okay? Number 2, the href attribute, which points to the location of your external file, needs to be very, very correct in order for that styling information to be correctly referenced by the browser's engine. So we'll save that HTML page, and I want us to let us style the anchor tag. Let us style the anchor tag and the footer using the external style sheet. So for the anchor tag, I will give it an ID. Let me just call it Google. And for my footer, we can give it a class. Let's give it a class. We call it home footer. Can give it a class. So given my anchor tag an ID called Google, and my footer, I've given it a class attribute called home footer. Now I want us to style these two using the external style sheet. So we'll go back to our external style sheet. One, we start with the anchor tag. Our anchor tag has an ID attribute, so we are going to use the hash symbol followed by the name, And for our anchor tag, we can change the color. Let's change the color. Change the color. Yellow, not yellow. We do green or green yellow. Okay, change the color. change the color. We can remove the underline. We can remove the underline. You know, by default, links have an underline, so we can remove the underline. Set this to none. And we can change the weight. And we can change the weight. So save that. And then for our footer is a class. Our footer is a class. Our footer is a class. So this one, I can simply change the color. I can simply change the color. Let me see. What is this one? Chartreuse, whatever that color is. And also we can put it as bold. Point bold. It bold. So I'll save this and then go back to my web page. Go back to my web page. And there I have my styled items. So if you see my anchor tag, the color has changed to yellow green. The underline has gone. And for my footer, the color has changed to chartreuse. The color has changed to chartreuse. So if your styling information for the external style sheet is not being applied, then the number one reason would be the location. You got the location wrong, the href attribute. That would be the number one reason. Number two reason would be the way you are referencing the elements you want to style, okay? So if you have placed as an ID, please make sure you're using the correct selector for the ID. If you placed a class, make sure you're using the correct class as your point of reference on the external style sheet, okay? Very, very important. Very, very important. So, who has been able to style their web page using an external style sheet? By a show of a thumbs up. Very, very good. Derek Wilson, Cassian, Hazel, Richard. Very, very, very good. Congratulations. That is amazing. That is amazing. Very, very nice. Very nice. Very, very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Very good. Very good. Very good. Good, 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 good. So I'll do a recap. And someone is asking the difference between a class and an ID. Yes, I think we defined that. Who can remind us? Difference between a class and an ID attribute. What are the differences between a class and an ID attribute? On the chat box. Difference between class and ID attributes. Difference between class and ID attributes. Very, very good, Peter. ID targets just one element. Yeah, so for the class, this one is used to target different or more than one element that are not related. Then you can use the class attribute or the class selector to target those elements. Very, very nice. Very good, very good, very, very good. Very good, very good. Good stuff, good stuff. Yeah, so yeah, those are the three ways. Those are the three ways in which you can apply CSS to a web page. One is inline CSS, two is internal CSS, and three is external CSS. So let me just see from the chat box. Let me just see. How did we define inline CSS? How did we define inline CSS? How did we define inline CSS? How do we define inline CSS? The definition. Directly to the element. Very, very good, Norman. Yes. Anyone else? Anyone else? Inline CSS applied to the HTML element. Yes. Within the element. Very, very good. Yes, you style directly to the element. You style directly to the element by adding the style attribute directly to an element within the opening tag of that specific element. And for inline styling, you go straight to the property value pairs. You do not need to define a selector. You do not need to have a declaration block. You simply go straight to the property and value pairs. And remember, each property has its own corresponding values, okay? Each property has its own corresponding values. Maybe you can do a bit of research and also practice more so that you can know what value belongs to which property, okay? They are not similar, Each property has its own corresponding values. Okay, they are very, very different. Okay, so that was inline styling. Who can define for us? Who can define for us? Who can define for us external styling? External styling. External styling. External styling. External styling. Just on the chat box. In the chat box. External styling. Yes, where you create a separate CSS file with the extension .css, and you link it using the link tag. Very, very nice. Yeah, very good, very good. So with external styling, you create a separate CSS file, and you save that file with the extension .css so that it is identified as a styling file. Thereafter, you link this file using the link tag within the head section, of your web page. So the beauty of external styling is, we've mentioned, this can be applied to multiple pages. It can be applied to multiple pages. So for example, let me just copy this. Let me copy this and create a new file. Let me just about.html. I've copied my index file. I will get rid of every other form of styling. Just leave external. Rid of this. Get rid of this. So I've created a new file. I've gotten rid of of internal and inline styling, and I just want to make use of external CSS. So this will be intro to CSS, about page. It's about page. So I'll save that, and then I can launch it with my live server. And there you have your about page using the same external CSS. As you can see, our footer and our link are still styled. Our footer and our link are still styled, but our H1 heading and our paragraph are not styled because we have gotten rid of the internal and inline styling. Okay, so with external CSS, you can style different and multiple pages by just using one single file, the external CSS file. You define all your styles there and then link that file to the various pages, and the styling will be applied to those different pages. So this one is the most preferred and the most recommended way of styling your web pages. You simply define an external CSS file, define your styling there, and link the file to your various web pages. Okay, so so far so good. So far, so good. There is one thing that I would like to show you in regards to images, and then there's something I'd like to show you in regards to images, and then I can welcome your questions. Images, and then we can do also spacing, images and spacing, and then I can welcome your questions, okay? Let me touch bit on images and images, and then we can move on to spacing. How do you apply spacing to your different elements? Okay, so I'll use the index page. I will use the index page, or let me use, let's just use the index page. So locate an image, any image that you want to use, locate any image that you want to use. Locate any image that you want to use. Locate any image that you want to use. Locate any image that you want to use and place it in your directory. Locate any image that you want to use, place it in your directory. May have created an images folder and placed my image there. Yeah. Locate any image that you want to use. So I'm going to place this image as a background image to my web page. I am going to place the image as a background image to my web page, and I am going to use external CSS. So to place it as the background image to my web page, we need to place it where? We need to place it on the body. So I will use an element selector. I will use the element selector, that is the body. And first things first, we need the image. So background image. And the value here, we will take the URL property. We will take the URL property. So where is our image? It is in images and build. It's build.jpg, JPG. Yep. Okay. Background image is the property. Background image is the property. Background image is the property. So if you have a very small image, if your image is not very large and you do not want it to be repeated multiple times, then you can do the background repeat and set this to no repeat so that it is not repeated. If you want it to cover the entire screen, then you would use background size and specify that to cover. And finally, we can just center the image using background position center. Background position center. So number one is the background image. Background image. This gives us the location. This gives us the location. This gives us the location of the image. Gives us the location of the image. Background repeat simply prevents the image from repeating. If the image is very, very small, then this one simply prevents image repeats. For the background size, if you want the image to cover the entire screen, you can use the background size property. You can use the background size property. And what this simply does is scale the image to cover the entire elements. And in our case, then our element is the body. And background position, that one is very, very straightforward. Background position is very straightforward. This one simply centers the image. That one simply centers the image. So I will save this. I will save this. Yeah, I will upload this. I'll upload this code base to a repository just as soon as I'm done and share that with you. So save that. Go back to my, where's my image? Where is my image? Where is my image? The image not displaying. Just check this. Background image, that A. Images be the JPEG, that one is fine. Style the CSS, that one is fine also. displaying. I'm the one not seeing it. Hmm. What have I gotten wrong? This one is fine. Okay. Oh, my path is wrong. Okay. Yeah. The styles folder. Okay. We're in the styles folder. I forgot. Since we're in the styles folder, we need to get out of that folder. So you need to traverse a level higher. You need to traverse a level higher and then get into the images folder, and then you can reference your file. Okay. Yeah. So there I have my image as the background image. Not a very good choice of image because my text is not visible, but still, that is how you would style a background image. That is how you'd style a background image using CSS. Using CSS to style a background image. Using CSS to style a background image. So please don't make the same mistake that I did on the location. This one needs to be very, very correct. If your image is in another folder, you need to go a level higher. That is, if your image is in another folder and your styling file is also in another folder, you need to go a level higher in order to correctly reference the location of that image. Yeah. Okay. So let me just create the repository real quick and then we will proceed. Let me just create that repo. This is week 3, Web 2025. Three. This is session 2025, week 3, session 1. Good. So we have images. Yes, and tabs. Yeah, so on the chat box, there is the link to the repository for this particular session. So yeah, there is a link to the repository. That is the link to the repository for this particular session. Yeah, also includes the image. Yeah. Yeah, so that is how you would include that is how you would include a background image. Remember that was a question that featured last week during our session when we were covering images. Yeah, so let me touch a bit on spacing, and then we can I can welcome your questions. Then I can make questions and call it a day. Yeah, so when it comes to spacing in CSS, we have two properties that we usually consider. We have two properties that we usually consider, and that is the margin. We have the margin and the padding. We have the margin and the padding. So for the margin, this is usually space outside an element's border. For the margin, that is space outside an element's border. And for the padding, this is space inside an element's border. Space inside an element's border. So for margins, its main purpose is just to create space between elements. So last week, when you are creating your images and you have like 3 images, they all appeared right next to each other. So if you wanted space between those images, then you would use the margin. You would use the margin. And for padding, if you have something like a container, either a section or a div, and you need space between the border of that container and the actual content, then you would use padding. So we are going to see, let us do a very, very practical example. We are going to do a practical example. So I will go to my about page. I'll go to my about page. I'll go to my about page, and here I'm going to do a div container. I will do a div here, and I will do an image on my div. I will do an image on my div. I can do, let me just do 500. Do an image on my div. And do image on my div, and we are going to showcase, let me do 2. We are going to showcase how you can do both margin and padding using that. So save that. Let's see here. So as external, let me remove this for now because it's giving us a background image. Okay. Size this. think this one is nice. Yeah, so we have our div there. We have our div there. And within our div, I have these two images. I have these two images. So I want to use margin and padding on these two images to showcase the different types of spaces, different types of spaces that you can have. So first of all, let me do internal. Let me do internal styling because my externals page already has a background image. I don't want to mess that up. So let me do internal styling here. So first things first, for my div, I'm going to place padding. I'm going to place padding of, let me say 50 pixels. 50 pixels all around. So save that, go back to my browser. I hope you've noted the difference. I hope you've noted some difference on the position of the image. Let me get rid of this. So initially the image was right at the border of the browser. If you can see, even the top is right next to the anchor tag. But if I place a padding of 50 pixels, then that is the result. So let me also do a border. I can do a border so that it's much visible. So that you can see the actual space. So that we can see the actual space. So that is our border. This is our border. Let me just remove the padding first. Let me remove the padding so that this can become very, very clear, the space. So padding, we've mentioned, padding is the space inside an element between the element's border and the content of that element. So currently there is no space. There is no space between the border and the content. And our content here being the images. There is no space. But once we place padding, then you can see we now have a space between the border and the content. That space is what we are referring to as margin. That space is the one that we are referring to as the margin. And if we want, the padding, sorry, I'm very, very sorry. That space inside is what we are referring to as the padding. So let us place space between the images. Let us place space between the image. And this one, we are going to use margin. So we can do 20 pixels on the margin. So this can place some space between our two images. You can place some space between our two images. And what have we defined the margin as? We have defined the margin as the space outside an element's border. And our element here is the image. So we are simply putting up a space between this element and anything that is surrounding it. Initially, you saw that this space was very, very limited. The space between here, it was very, very limited. But now we have an additional space of 20 pixels, courtesy of the margin spacing. Let me just update this on the repository very, very fast. If you need the code base, I'll update this on the repository. That is the About Us. The About page. Yeah, it is now up to date. So these two spacing properties, they are very, very important when it comes to your layout and your positioning techniques when you are designing your web pages. You will use them very, very much when you are positioning your items on your web pages. And this spacing follows a certain, how can I call it? It follows a certain protocol. It follows a certain protocol. You can define the various positions of this spacing. You can define the various positions of this spacing. Either you are spacing the top, the bottom, or the right and the left sides of elements. So you can specify those different types of spacing: the top, the bottom, the left, or the right. Okay, but in the event that you want to space equally across all those positions, then you use one figure, as I have done so. You can use one figure. CSS also provides properties that can enable you to define the spacing for the different positions. So you can space the left, you can space the right, you can space the top, or you can space the very bottom. If that is only what you want to space, then you can use the different positional spacing that CSS offers. So you can have something like so, you can have something like so, or let us say you can have for the right, you can have for the right as well, you can have for the top, you can have for the top as well, or you can have for the bottom. You can have for the bottom. So this is also valid. This is also valid. You can position your elements the way you please according to the design that you want to achieve. And you can play around with this. You can play around with this. Let me just get rid of the first one. You can play around with these figures so that you actually achieve the very, very best of the very best position and layout of your elements. So you can play around with these figures. Let me see what I have for this. Let me see what I have for this. Something like so, something like so. You have something like so. So you can play around with those figures until you achieve the most desired layout and appearance for your different elements. But then again, this is the long way. This is the long way. There is a much shorter way of defining this. There is a much shorter way of defining this when it comes to spacing. So I'll just use the property margin, and then following the clockwise rule, starting from the top, I can say my top, I want it to be 20 pixels. Sorry, this is 20 pixels. Stop, following the clockwise direction. You follow the clockwise direction starting from the top. So we have the top. The next one would be the right side. The next one would be the right side. So I can say 15 pixels. And next will be the bottom. I can say 5 pixels. And then the next would be the left. I can say maybe 10 pixels. And this is a much shorter way of defining the positional spacing. This is a much shorter way of defining the positional spacing. Instead of using these four, you can simply use one CSS rule, one simple CSS rule, and then define the different positions. And we said you follow the clockwise direction. You follow the clockwise direction. Follow the clockwise direction. The first one is the top, then the right, then the bottom, and finally the left side. Same applies to the padding. Same applies to the padding. You can follow this. Same applies to the padding. And in the event that you want to do only the top and the bottom, not the top and the bottom, only if you want to do horizontally and vertically, then you can do two values. You can do two values. You can do two values. You can do two values, and these ones will represent top and bottom, and finally left and right. Okay, if you do two values, they represent top and bottom. The first one would be the top and bottom, and the second one would be the left and the right sides of your element. Okay, and that does it for our spacing. That does it for our spacing. And I have come to the end of my lesson. I think I can welcome your questions if you have any. I can welcome your questions if you have any. Please feel free to ask any question. Please feel free to ask any question. The repo is updated, I think. The repo is dated. Border, you use the border property if you want to place a border. Border, you use the border property. This is a border property. For borders, you use the border property. The first value is the size of the border. The first value is the size of the border. The second value would be the pattern. You can either do solid, you can do dashed, and so on and so forth. And the third value is the color of the border. Okay? That is how you place a border. We've actually just done the box model because the box model is simply spacing and the content. You have the border, you have the spacing, and you have the content. That defines the box model. Border, margin, padding, and the content. That defines the box model. What we've just gone through is simply the box model. So Flexbox is next week. That is advanced CSS. When we'll be going through layout techniques, that is when we will get to see Flexbox. Flexbox not today. Today was just an introduction to CSS and some of the basic CSS properties that you would come across. Next week is when we delve into some advanced topics. Typography, that refers to font. For font, you can use system fonts that are readily available on your local machine, or you can download fonts from the internet and use those fonts on your projects. You would simply need to define the font property. You simply need to define the font property, and that one is usually defined within the body font family. Use the font family. So this is a list of fonts within my local machine. I can choose whichever I want here, and then that one will change the font within my web page. That will change the font within my web page. Let me see. Yeah, my font has changed. It's not the same as this one. So yeah, you can use the font family if you want to change the typography of your web pages. Okay. Let me pause this chat so that I can go through your questions first. And then I think for the images, we've already discussed how you can make sure they do not, if they are too huge. If they are too huge, you can do background size cover. That way it will only extend to the extent of the element. And in our case, our element is the body. Setting margin to auto really does not assist you with anything. If you want definite positions for your elements, then you need to define a value for the margin property. Auto really just conforms automatically to the current position of your element. So it really does not do much to help. For your assignment, follow instructions. Please, just follow instructions. If the assignment says use 3 selectors, just use 3. Let us make a habit of following instructions, okay? Code, I've shared the repository. I think I've shared the repository on the code. Let me just copy it again. That is a link to the code repository. Sliders is advanced. We are just in introduction. Separation, I think we've just done margin and padding for the spacing. I think we've just done that. Yes, Margaret, for the class selector, anywhere you include the class attribute, that is where it will only be applied, okay? So if you do not want the class attribute to be applied on any element, then do not include it. Rotating background images. That one is advanced. Flexbox, I said that one is next week. For the class notes, please access the LMS. Every note, everything that I've gone through is on the class notes on the LMS. Yeah, so you find them there. And of course, we always offer additional resources, including videos on the LMS for your research and further reading. You can find all that on the LMS. Image sliders, not now. I think that one you would do research on your own. What else? I'm just saying sliders, rotating images. Sliders, rotating images. That's an advanced topic when it comes to CSS. So I think I've covered all of the questions here. Yeah, so in regards to the hackathon, the date will be communicated to you. So please be patient, but be on the lookout. Be patient, but be on the lookout for any communication regarding the hackathon. It should be next week. I'm not sure about the date, but it will be communicated to you. Oh, and as I began the session, I mentioned there is an AI agent models masterclass that is happening at 12:30 East African time today. So you are most welcome to join that. You are most welcome to join that one. So any other question? Any other question? The chat box is open again. The chat box is open. So any other question? You're saying I close the session, eh? Responsiveness, we'll cover that next week. Yeah, so for the AI masterclass, I think the link will be shared on the PLP socials. So just look at the Telegram channel. I think the link will be shared there. Yeah, you have to wait. Links open after the links are usually, we have a timeline on when links usually open. So depending on what was set, then that is when the link will be open. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes to the class, to the session, to the beginning of the session. That is when the link will be open. Yes, this class has been recorded, so you'll give me an hour for the video to complete rendering, and then I will upload it to the LMS. Yeah, I'm informed the link is on the LMS. So yes, log into the LMS, you'll see the link. React is in the next phase. So React is after the first 8 weeks. So yes, we are going to go through React, definitely. Yeah, so yeah, I think you're just repeating the questions. And guys, I think you don't go through the I don't think you go through the class curriculum. Yes, we are going to go through JavaScript. So that should be on week 5, if I'm not wrong. Once again, let me just be very, very clear. For the hackathon, please, 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 please follow instructions as they are provided. Do not use anything, any library that has not been mentioned on the instructions. So if you are disqualified because you do not follow instructions, you have no one to blame but yourself, okay? So the hackathon have very, very strict instructions. Follow those instructions as per what they have been, as per what has been provided. You go outside those instructions, you will not be graded as required. Yeah, and remember there is a reward for the top 3, for those who will emerge the top 3. So you'll have to wait for those instructions, Moses. Sessions are the same, Syria. We just split them into 3, but the sessions are just the same. On date will be communicated. Hey, we are not focusing. Am I speaking to myself? Anyway, that is it for our session. Yeah, Abdi Noor, seems you are late. We covered how to place a background image. So I'll refer you to this recording once it's uploaded on the LMS. Yeah, that is it for our session. Allow me to end the session there so that you can join the masterclass. If you please, thank you so much for the wonderful questions. Thank you for your company and thank you for joining the session. As always, remember your assignments and your quizzes on the LMS. in as much as there are issues and the LMS has become intermittent, it is something we are working towards permanently resolving. Yeah. No system is 100%. You expect issues here and there, but rest assured, there is a team working around the clock to sort out all issues so that they are fully resolved. So don't forget your assignments, don't forget your quizzes. Yeah, very, very important. Remember, all these things, they add up to your awarding of a certificate. So please let them be very, very important to you. Take them very, very seriously. So thank you so much for your time. I will end the session there. If you want to meet us again, we'll still be covering the same content in the afternoon session and the evening session. That is 2 p.m. East African time and 6:30 p.m. East African time. You are most welcome. Otherwise, have a very, very good day.